Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to Culz Interviews. I'm really excited actually for this one. You guys should know the subject matter because we did cover when the footsteps stop. And hey, we always say sometimes social media has some drawbacks, but I think this is one of the cool sides of social media. Is I found the book, and I believe it's your nephew. He posted about it,
Yes.
and so I followed him. I bought the book because I was like, oh, it takes place in Colorado a little bit. It's about ghost stories. I read it. There's definitely some stories I really connected to. And so I reached out. You were super kind to join us. So, Paul, thanks again for joining us. Uh, Perhaps for anyone that doesn't know you, outside of maybe if they've seen the book review or read your book, do you want to just give a little bit of background about what you do and who you are?
Sure. My name is Paul Ost. I live here in the Denver area. And um, I guess a little bit about myself. I've had experiences with the paranormal ever since I was a little kid. Kind of kept the stories to myself for the most part. Family knew about it, close friends, a few close friends knew about it. But I've been experiencing these things probably since I was 5 or 6 years old. And eventually this led into, um, I don't know, having a sense of knowing when things would happen. And so it's kind of led me into a path of kind of being able to do psychic readings. And so I spend a lot of my time doing that. And essentially, through the years, I've had all these stories, and my nephew Alex uh, prodded me a little bit last Christmas to start getting some of these stories on paper. And so it was with his collaborative effort that I came up with this memoir, or some of the stories, some of the things that have happened to me through the years.
Plus, I mean, just because I've followed you now on some of the social media platforms, you take some great photos. I've been really enjoying the photos you've been taking around, like Sloan's Lake and stuff.
Thank you. Yeah. So uh, people who follow me on Instagram or on Facebook probably know my morning walks. I tend to walk in the morning and try to get sunrise pictures. Colorado's probably one of the best places in the world to capture, and I appreciate the shout out. But yeah, I that's in my spare time when I don't have anything to do. I'm walking around the lake taking pictures.
No, and they turn out really, really good. Like you said, sunrises and sunsets in Colorado are just it's hard to match. I've been to a lot of states and seen a lot, but just something about the mountains and I don't know if it's the elevation. Plus, you get some great skyline shots, and I'm huge into architecture, so I'm always really excited to see those. Going into like some of your sightings, you talked about like obviously the times when you grew up. Maybe is that why you didn't come out and talk about your sightings? Because I like relating to some of our experiences. I know we lived in a house that had some experiences, quite a few, but it wasn't something we talked about till it was I got older, maybe middle school, high school, and
Right.
I think that's just when it started to become a little bit less taboo to talk about. Is that kind of similar to your experience there?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I grew up in a traditional kind of Midwest Irish slash German Catholic household where my mom was pretty devout, and we went to church every week. And um, I think that we all, to some degree, had a difficult time trying to um, understand what we were seeing and then apply the religious kind of filters through it. And yeah, I think it was a bit taboo. I think that is spot on. And although that there were times that I did involve my parents, the majority of the time when those incidents weren't scaring me, in other words, I can handle what I was seeing, I kept it to myself. But those times that I did need to share something that was really scaring me, I shared it, and that was kind of it. We didn't talk about it until years and years later. But through the years and through the stories, I found out that other members of my family were experiencing similar things as well.
Isn't that interesting how that works? You experience so many different things and you think you're the only one. And then later, like your family's like, yeah, of course we saw stuff like that. And then you're just like, why didn't you tell me? It would have made me feel so much better, you know?
Exactly, exactly. And I don't want to make it sound like my mom was a lot more devout Catholic than my dad. He really didn't go to church. I don't want to make it sound like that my mom was not understanding and just kind of went to religion for an answer. She didn't necessarily do that, but um, quintessential 60s large Catholic family, you know, dinner time talk wasn't about ghosts. It was about
Yeah.
what was going on in everybody's day. So I just didn't want to slight my mom in any way with her religion.
Oh yeah, no, definitely no. I just it's funny because I can relate there where, I've had experiences in this one house, kind of similar to you, where it's one house that you guys kind of relate back to where it kind of started for you.
Right,
Ours is the Hamilton house, which you wouldn't, I think, expect anything to be there outside of maybe it sat abandoned for a year during the housing crisis in the late 80s, early 90s.
right.
But yeah, so many experiences. And I just remember one dinner going there and just being like so shocked that my yaya, which is Greek for grandmother because our side's Greek, and my mom and my dad and all these people had experiences even before then. And I was like, oh, so it's like a normal thing, to experience. So it's a cool kind of realization. And I know one story, maybe I'm jumping the boat a little bit, that I want to talk about, speaking of my ya, is the hand story, because I know I talked about it in my review.
Right,
There was, yeah, that was just something like so. I don't even know how to describe like my feelings when I read it, but I texted my yacht right away and I was like, "You won't believe what I read." Like it's the first time I've ever heard someone else have a similar experience, because hers was she had actually seen like a black veil. She kind of related it to like Jackie Kennedy's veil, if you
oh
know how
sure,
that one looked like.
right,
And there were some other weird experiences in that house. We actually have a picture where you can see something peeking out a window, which is weird.
right, yeah,
Uh, but yeah, she overheard her mom and dad talking that forget which side of the family, but one of their parents had seen just a hand in the room. And
right.
when I read yours, I was like, that is the craziest like connection. So do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, and this was years into the experiences that I was having. So for those of you who don't know, I grew up in Kansas City, and I don't know how much I should share or not, but I'll just throw this bit in, and then we can explore it if you want to. But uh, I grew up literally just a mile from the Kansas border, so you hear about the border war, and of course the Civil War. Um, really impacted the Kansas City area because of the proximity to Kansas, which was a free state. Missouri was a slave. So I had already experienced seeing a soldier in my house. And then I would say this is probably, 2 or 3 years after that, being I was home from school, not feeling well. And for the house I grew up in, it seemed like a lot of the activity was in the kitchen. I happened to be in the family room just off the kitchen and kept on hearing footsteps going up and down the hallway uh, that kind of led into the kitchen from the living room. And it was mid-afternoon, it was daylight, and I really had thought that one of my brothers or sisters had come home early from school. I couldn't explain where the steps were coming from. My mom was like at the store, my dad was at work, but I kept on hearing the footsteps. And I would say after 3 or 4 times of hearing it, I finally got up and kind of tried to wait to see when the footsteps would stop. And I would try to jump out to see who it was to scare them. Um, but every time I went into the kitchen, they would stop. Well, at the kind of the end of the hallway that leads into the living room, there is the basement door that obviously would lead to the basement, and the footsteps were continuing. So this is probably about the 10th time I've heard them. And as I'm walking into the kitchen, I looked left down the hallway towards the basement, and as I was going through to the dining room, I saw that the basement door was open just a bit. I thought that wasn't open a second ago. What the heck? And as I was looking at it, I saw movement, and I couldn't really tell all what was there. But the only thing I saw was a hand, and the hand grabbed the doorknob. So, old school house, but grabbed the doorknob and slammed it shut. So I just made a beeline out of the dining room and ran to our next door neighbors, elderly couple, and we called him Mr. Ed. Tall guy, probably 6'6", 6'7", tall guy. And I just remember him grabbing a gun and going back to the house. And we looked through the house. When we got back into the house, the basement door was open again. But we went through the house all to, everywhere, and nothing. There was just nothing there. So um, that happened more than once, but that was the very first time, and that just scared the hell out of me. I was always afraid of waking up at night and just having a hand kind of pulling down, I don't know, pulling down the sheets or opening up the drapes. I just envisioned that hand for the longest time.
Now, because I've had this picture of my Ya's mom, grandmother's hand, what did yours look like? Was it just like a normal human hand or
Yeah, I looked like a normal human hand, and as I mentioned before, Keegan, that I had already seen this soldier in my house, and so and that was a couple years before. And I think I shared this in the book. I I I didn't equate it to the soldier in the moment. But as the neighbor, Mr. Ed, was kind of walking around the house, he's like, "What did this guy look like?" And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, he's not going to believe me. There was someone in the house, let alone that it wasn't really someone, it's something, it's a hand." So I kind of fibbed and just described the soldier that I had seen a couple years before. But in response to your question, it looked like a normal hand. There was no clothing, so I essentially saw it from maybe forearm or wrist to the fingertips, and there was nothing on it, no jewelry, no shirt or jacket, just kind of a normal hand. And um, yeah, it scared the hell out of me.
yeah, yeah. No, I bet I have not seen anything like that. So I don't know how I would react. I have seen a couple spirits, and I guess if you wanted to hear about that sometime, I could tell you, but nothing where it was just like a disembodied like body part, and I think that's almost creepier than a full body because at least the full body you can almost be like it's just a person, but then just a hand, there's something unusual.
Well, and that's why I kept on thinking, what the heck is this?
Hmm.
And am I going to see this again? So when you did the book review and you talked about your grandmother having the same experience, that was the first time I'd ever heard in all of my years that somebody had this similar experience to me. And um, I don't know, it feels good to be validated because it wasn't really validated in the time. Um, Again, my parents believed me. We didn't talk about it, but they never said to me, "Paul, you're lying," or "We don't believe anything you're saying." They listened to me when I told them that, which I think in a way was supportive, but in another way, it's like, well, the hand's kind of floating around the house. Is it going to appear again? And when and where will it, make itself known?
Yeah, no, that's cool, and I'm glad me sharing that story helped you as well. So we kind of helped each other in a way.
Exactly, exactly. Because it's part of the reason I never wanted to put these stories out is because um, I was nervous about what people would think or say. None of us really like being challenged, you know, especially as kids. We want to be believed by our parents. And so, there are many more stories that I'm sure I've forgotten that happened to me in that house that I just kind of pushed down because, you know, you get to the point as a kid thinking, when is mom going to stop believing me, right? When are they
Mhm.
going to stop supporting? So yeah, so hearing that validation from you through your grandmother it was nice to hear because I didn't get that in the moment.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I texted her and she's like, "Well, you'll have to let me know what else was seen in the house." Because again, like I said, her house, she had some strange experiences, and kind of going back to the soldier aspect. Because I think the Kansas Missouri part of the war gets forgotten. And like you say, it's Kansas City's right on the border. I know when went to Kansas City, we actually stayed in Atchison, Kansas,
Yes. Yeah.
and just drove across back and forth. I think it was
Right.
like half an hour or something like that. And we'd go to St. Joe and Kearney, and um, beautiful area up in
Yeah.
that area
Yeah.
though. So what was it like for you growing up in the Kansas City area? Like, what do you think influenced you the most?
Yeah. I think I've always been fascinated by history and kind of genealogy, where I came from and where either side of my family came from. But for Kansas City, there is just so much history, of course. Um, the Civil War aspect, but there's a big mafia connection in Kansas City, and there was, Kansas City massacre happened at Union Station. You can still see the bullet holes, and that kind of pales in comparison when you hear about the St. Valentine's Day massacre in Chicago. But there's just a lot of history in in the Kansas City area. The the river was a connection to the west, and there's uh, Native American tribes, and I think that there's a kind of an aspect and spirituality that's connected to the land there as well. But for me, I was really fascinated by the Civil War and um, these little kind of known battles that were really pretty bloody. That again paled in comparison when you're talking to somebody about Gettysburg or Shiloh. Um, but they were real. And for me, I was able to get on my bike and ride my bike to these areas where they had these markers that explained what was going on. And I loved doing that and just kind of imagine what was going on, especially in light of this soldier that I saw in the house.
Yeah, like you said, there's so much cool history in that area. We on my mom's side, there's some relation to the James gang and stuff. So
Yeah,
that's why I was out in that area, was filming some of that stuff. And I know out in Atchison, there's the whole Lewis and Clark Trail you can follow.
exactly. Yep.
What I mean, it's so cool to just step back in time almost and see like the huts and stuff. And
You can see, and you can go up in Atchison and see the bluffs, and you can just kind of, to overlook the Missouri River,
mhm.
and just imagine these people trekking west, in this big, wide river. So and you mentioned Kearney, and of course, the James Gang and Jesse James, uh, the Fords and all that. And you get that whole aspect of Amelia Earhart when you're talking
Mhm.
about Atchison, and so this kind of crazy aspect, what happened to her, that she grew up not too far from Kansas City, just right on the Kansas Missouri line again. So just this kind of limbo area that I swear this kind of like on a Bermuda Triangle type thing where these kind of crazy things happen. And I should share really quick too. Uh, some of the kids that I grew up with that have read the book have come to me after the fact and said, I grew up, down the street from you, Paul. Do you remember, my house? And he's like, yeah. And this one friend of mine, Gene, um, relayed a story about footsteps, and they would hear footsteps going up and down the hall. And she's like, I thought I was the only one in the neighborhood that had that. And several kids have shared their similar type story growing up in the area where we grew up. It wasn't just me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's cool that you were able to also help maybe validate their experiences too.
Absolutely. And I'm going to probably try to touch on a little bit of that in the second book as these stories have come to light.
No, that's awesome. You should, because it might even maybe not just people that grew up in that community, but could help other people, somewhere else. They just pick up your book and read it and they're like, hey, it's normal to feel this way and have these experiences
Right.
and
Yeah.
be able to talk about it. So I think you should. It's definitely super inspiring. And one thing I wanted to ask you too is like, do you think the water, as far as like the river, has anything to do with it? Like, could the water influence like maybe all this activity there?
I'm a believer in it. Yes, I think that the conjunction, not the conjunction, what's a right word, where the Kansas River or the Kaw, as locals will call it, the Kaw River goes into the Missouri River. Just in downtown Kansas City in the River Market area. And so those two rivers kind of combining into each other, I think it's mystical in a way. And if you, and some of this probably is scientific as well, but if you talk to locals about weather and the tornadoes and things that usually happen in Kansas City, you will hear people talk about how the rivers kind of impact all that. And again, I know there's a scientific component, but um, the Native American tribes, the Shawnee and the other tribes that are right in that area, there's something about that. I've never really explored it. I've really kind of focused on the Civil War, but yeah, I think that there is something to do with the river and how the Native Americans, thrived on that and lived on that, and their lives changed because of the expansion west.
Yeah, no, I've definitely wondered that myself because I think some of our best investigations have been outdoor in the snow. Here in
Yeah,
Colorado, we're walking around and it had freshly snowed, and I'm like, maybe there's just a connection there with the water or something.
I believe it. I definitely believe it. Talk about dowsing rods, and I learned how to do dowsing rods later in life, and I really didn't know what they were. But yeah, it's all about divining rods to find water, and so I think there is definitely a connection between water and the paranormal. I firmly believe that.
Now, as far as dowsing rods, because we haven't really gotten too far into that with any of our guests, what's the proper way for someone to use it if they're looking to get into it?
I I was self-taught. I will throw that out first. Um, the second thing I'll say is there are dowsing rod societies as well. So I'm not an expert on this, and so I know there's a dowsing rod society in Denver. So if people are local, you can definitely reach out to the chapter I've done in the past, and they're awesome to work with. At least uh, in the distant past. I assume they're still around, but I just picked up a pair of dowsing rods in an old hardware store down in Colorado Springs years ago, and again was self-taught. Um, it- for those of you who don't know, they're kind of like an L-shaped uh, kind of metal that you hold in your hands, and you can ask the powers that be certain questions, and if they cross, it means yes, and if they don't cross, it means no. So I guess the proper way to do it is just to kind of start picking them up and do it um, by asking questions. Now, I do want to throw a caution out because I kind of was willy nilly when I first started with this, and I had what I thought were some repercussions of uh, my being a bit naive about the power of the rods. Um, and I won't go into details. Some of the things were in the book, but essentially I called the Dowsing Rod Society because crazy things were going on in the house. And I just remember one thing that she told me is that when you start using dowsing rods, you're opening up at a portal and you just don't know what's on the other side of that portal. So it may seem benign and you may start getting answers that you want to hear or you think you um, will lead you to a certain answer that you're looking for. But she said you don't know what's on the other side of that portal, and something malevolent, something mean, something nasty could be on the other side, kind of masking itself as being benign. And I think that's what happened to me. So I would just caution people who are just picking it up for the heck of it to really do their research before they really start opening a can of worms they don't want open.
Yeah, I mean, you could say it's Grandpa Joe, but it doesn't mean it actually is, right?
Exactly. Well, it's kind of like the Ouija board too, Keegan. I
Mhm.
think that people kind of play around with the Ouija board without fully understanding what they're doing and what's behind these entities or the powers that be in whatever realm they're in. And so it kind of aligns that same way. You just don't necessarily have the alphabet and the numbers and yes and no and the other things that you find on a Ouija board, which makes it that much more, I think, complicated and for me, it turned out to be a bit terrifying before I was able to get that settled back down.
Yeah, we've done some videos on the Ouija board, and I've always said it's not like the board. It's just you're opening yourself up and kind of giving permission to something that you
Right.
don't know what it is. You could do it with a piece of paper and a banana,
Yeah.
and it would have the same outcome. It's just that intent,
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, if people want to get on my website and shoot me a question or two, if they have specifics, I'll be happy to help anybody with it. But again, I'm not an expert on that. I don't get too many requests to do dowsing rod readings. I definitely do them, but um, it, it, I'm very careful about who I invite in when I do that, and I just don't do it very often.
Yeah, no, because you always got to know where people are too in their life, because I mean that can affect the outcome as well. At
Yeah,
least from what I've seen.
yeah,
Going into like a famous one, you're in Colorado now. We're in Colorado. People always ask me about the Stanley Hotel. I've
right.
been there. You wrote about it in your book, and it was really nice to see someone else had a similar experience to me.
Yeah.
So, do you want to describe your time up at the Stanley, and then we'll go a little bit further into it?
Yeah, I tell you, I heard about it a million times, and of course, I've seen The Shining and read the book, and um, I I essentially got invited to a wedding and jumped at the chance to go because the wedding party was staying at the Stanley, and I was geared up, man. I thought, I've had these experiences for 20, 30 years, and I'm going to go up there and capture everything on uh, camera, and I download a couple of ghost radar type apps on my phone. Um, but yeah, I got up there and it was really disappointing. I can tell you from a very young age, I can walk into a space and know if it is active or not. I and I'm wrong at times too. I don't want people to think that I'm 100% right because I'm not. But I generally have a good sense of what I'm walking into. And the afternoon that we first arrived, I was just anticipating this kind of electric response, and I walked in, and it's like, okay, this is it, because I felt nothing. And it was in my mind kind of bright and cheery and nothing like the book, nothing like the movie, nothing like I expected. But my partner and I did the ghost radar uh, numerous times, and we got a few little hits here and there. I walked down a couple hallways thinking I would kind of find the twins kind of at the end of the hallway, and disappointed not to find them. But yeah, so we were there for 2 nights and nothing. And I will say nothing except for the when we were checking out, there's a big grand kind of staircase that kind of goes up from the lobby up into the second floor. And I was coming down the second floor. I There are pictures hanging up on the wall, and I just noticed the movement for a second, snapped my camera. I really wasn't sure what I was looking at, but um, I just snapped, and I didn't see anything on at the moment. This is kind of like the old digital with an SD scan disc thing in it. But when I got home and I was going through pictures of the wedding, the very last picture I took, there's a big old orb floating right where I saw motion, and it blends into the background in this cool ornate wallpaper, but it's there to be seen. And so that was the only thing that happened. I heard nothing, felt nothing, smelled nothing, and yeah, I don't know if I'll need to go back up there again. It's lovely. It's a beautiful place. I don't want to discourage, people from going up. I don't want to have Stanley Hotel call to say they're going to sue me because I'm saying stuff. But for me, yeah, it, it wasn't what was cracked up to be.
Yeah, no, I definitely felt very similar. We went up there and we stayed longer, but we got there super early, so we did like a history tour,
Yeah,
and I mean that was super cool. I definitely recommended the hotel and the architecture and the mountains and the scenery. Everything's beautiful. But yeah, we just didn't feel anything. Like when I went to Waverly Hills in Kentucky, it's outside of Louisville,
yeah,
you could see things and feel things like during the day. And I was like,
right.
okay, there's like a completely just different feeling. And you mentioned an electrical feeling like when you walk into a place. Now, I have a question about that because when we were doing an investigation at one of our investigators' cousin's house, there was one room. It felt like you walked into like water, but it was electrified. Is that kind of what you feel like?
Yeah, exactly. It's not like a shock. if that
Mhm.
makes any sense. It's uh, for anybody again who grew up in the Midwest, it's almost the moments before like a lightning strike type thing. You just kind of feel the electricity in the air from the lightning, if that makes any sense. It's not a shock like a static shock or um, something along that line. But yeah, it's just kind of a low murmur kind of feel that it's like there's something in here, electric, connected, carbon-based something is here.
No, that's interesting. I've never heard anyone else say that. So you're helping affirm something else that we've experienced on our end too. So that's super cool. Now, like when for writing, and this is something I've struggled with, is it's hard for me to write about myself and
Yeah.
my stories because I've lived it. I guess I just don't find it interesting. Was it for you writing the book? I mean, I know you said your nephew kind of like helped prod you along, but was it kind of difficult too?
It was, and I kind of chuckled to myself because I think most of my friends, especially those who are listening or will listen to this, will laugh because I do like talking about myself. So I will throw that out. But this type of stuff, I don't necessarily like talking about. Again, not that I was ever shamed in terms of being told not to talk about it, but again, for me as a young man in a very religious kind of household, there was a struggle for me to ponder, and that just stuck with me. So, in terms of writing, um, my process is I just write as I remember, and my intent for this book was for it to be conversational in nature. I wanted it to be like you're sitting across the table from me, and I'm telling you a story about what happened to me when I was 12. Um, my process is that I just get it out and I don't edit. I just get the story out, and then I let somebody else, either my sister or my nephew, went back and kind of edited it. But for me, I didn't want to change the raw the raw energy or the emotion that was behind the stories. Again, it's very personal. I think it was tough for me to write about some of the things that have happened. Um, but yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. It was tough, and it's kind of weird for it to be out there because I'll say this: so many things have happened to me in my life that I don't remember anything. I don't remember, I do a psychic reading and someone will call me a couple weeks after the fact and say, "Hey, you remember when you told me?" And I usually say, "No, I don't. I don't remember." And so a lot of these stories that came up were actually from prompting from friends or family when I went to them and said, "Hey, I'm going to tell the story." And they said, "Okay, you have permission to do it." So I would write the story and then I sent it to them to read it before it went into the book. And a lot of times people came back and said, "Yeah, you only captured a little bit. Not only did that happen, but X, Y, and Z happened as well." And so I was able to incorporate that because I forgot all about it. So I don't know, again, if that is helpful to your listeners, but um, I encourage people that are experiencing things. It's kind of cathartic to kind of get this out on paper and kind
Mhm.
of read. I seldom read the book. I'm up to page 15, but I've not gone back and read it all because it just takes me on so many different paths.
Yeah, no, like you said, the style as far as being like a conversation, I'd agree there. I thought it was just really enthralling and pulled me in and kept me wanting to go back. I read it a lot when I was on lunch or break and at home. And if I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about it or texting people about some of the experiences, and I was like, "Oh, this is super, super cool." And I don't think I've ever had that experience with a book that I've kind of just randomly found.
Yeah.
A lot of times people recommend it. So this is super cool to be like this early and find a book and be able to help share it. And, you know, now that you're in Colorado, what's the difference maybe in acceptance now in Kansas or Missouri and Colorado with like ghosts and spiritualism and stuff like that today?
I think people are more open to the paranormal in Colorado. I think I just think that native Coloradoans or people that have lived here for a long while, I think are more in tune with uh, that this other realm. And I suppose part of it is, I think, Midwest Missouri is more traditional in its thought process. And I don't know if that makes sense. Again, I don't want to malign religion or people's beliefs, but I think that you get stunted a bit when you're in a kind of a limited, um, I don't know, thought process, I guess. So for Colorado, I can tell you, a, a friend of a friend of mine, her son lived in a place uh, in kind of central Denver that was experiencing things. And they called me kind of out of the blue and said, "Can you come over and just take a look at the house and walk around?" And he was ready to move, and he was concerned that these entities, things that were happening to him and his daughter, were going to follow him into the new place. And again, kind of walked in that house. It's like, you don't have to say anything else. I can tell you where it is, who it is, what's going on. Um, but in any event, I don't think that something like that would have ever happened to me in Kansas City. I don't know if people would let, at least when I was younger, I don't think people would get to that point of being able to say or thinking about saying, "I wonder if Paul could come over and take a look." Here, yeah, I don't think people are much more in tune.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some places in Colorado. When we went up to Cripple Creek, it was one of the most open places about like hauntings and stuff I've
Yeah,
ever been to.
yeah,
People are like, they tell you about their haunting, and they'd be like, "Did you go check out that place down there? Because they're haunted." So we'd walk over there, and they let us walk around and do. It's pretty fascinating. Um, One area we've mainly just covered the history of. We haven't really done any like paranormal investigation or anything. Was Cheeseman Park
yes,
because of its history as a cemetery with the bodies still there. You know, they dig them up every so often. You
right.
know, have you had any feelings around Cheeseman?
Um, yes, and I'll have a story for the second book. But yes, several there. There are times. First off, I'll just say this. This is really more in relation to Botanic Gardens, which was part of the cemetery before all that kind of split off from Cheeseman. So definitely in Cheeseman, but more in the Botanical Gardens area. And yeah, I just had an experience not more than a couple of months ago when I was there with a friend, and I was in there for 5 or 10 minutes. It's like, I want out of here. It just, there was an energy that was not good. And yeah, so I left, and I kind of came to find out that an incident happened probably within an hour after I left.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, so if you're not familiar with Botanic Gardens, they have filmed or picked up some entities through their CCTV, their security cameras, and they compiled a film about it. And so I don't know if they still show it or not, but I attended a kind of a ghost tour event at Botanical Gardens, and they let us watch this movie, and it's fascinating. You definitely sense it. So um, but yeah, Cheeseman as well. But I think the big activity is
The
in
botanical.
Botanic Gardens itself.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we filmed a little bit in Cheeseman. It was supposed to be a two-parter. Unfortunately, we haven't finished part two for some family reasons on that side. But part one was mainly talking about poltergeists
Yeah,
because we're not rolling in dough, so we couldn't just fly up to New York and film up there
right,
where it happened. So we're like, it's a fun little way to teach Colorado history. And we went to the old cemetery gates because there's
right.
a road that you can see them. But someone asked what we were doing, and we told them, we're like, yeah, we're filming about this. And they're like, you should check out The Changeling. It's a film with George C. Scott that's
Yeah,
based on it. Yeah.
yeah.
And it was so good. I was like, this is awesome because I guess the director grew up in a house in that area.
In that area, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard different stories. I've never lived on the park. I've lived near it, but I have friends who have lived on the park and have told stories about seeing entities. Most of them are on the north side of the park, towards. I guess that would be 13th going towards the art museum. I think there's a lot of activity up by the kind of memorial that's built on the east side of the park near the entrance, the back entrance to the Botanical Gardens. I think that area especially has a lot of activity. That area, day or night, kind of freaks me out. I'm not a big fan of that, and I try to avoid it as much as I can. But yeah, The Changeling is amazing, amazing film.
That's one of my favorite ghost movies because even though we do a lot with the paranormal, I'm not a big ghost movie person
Yeah,
just because I think a lot of them would kind of get cheesy. Like, I love Ghostbusters though because it's classic, and
who doesn't,
Changeling,
right? Yeah,
Conjuring, I like just because it kind of feels a little bit more grounded than some of
yeah,
them. Uh, Going back to like a haunting and stuff, with your experiences, what do you think makes it more likely to happen, or experience? Like, Stanley is so notorious, but it's harder to experience. Is it just because it's so busy there? There's so many people.
yeah. I think that's part of it. Again, I don't want to claim that I'm an expert, but um, I think there's enough activity up there that I think, in a way, the entities just kind of get bored. And so I don't think that there is as much activity as one would expect. For me, I think there's just, I don't know if it's necessarily a connection to an actual structure as it is to the land. So personally, I believe that I think things attached to space in terms of land, not necessarily to what's built in there. So I don't know if I can come with one or two or three uh, specifics, um, because I don't think it's based necessarily on the age of a house or the length of ownership of like a piece of farmland. But I think those are two components that can come into play. I really think it's just about an entity that didn't finish what they intended to do. And they're just attached themselves to wherever they were at when they died. And they're going to keep there, stay there until that gets resolved.
Yeah, which is something I've heard a lot, and I think you mentioning the land being connected is interesting because our buddies Navajo, he grew up on the reservation, and that's a big thing with them too. Is just the connection to the land, and it's actually the land that there's a lot of connection with family and previous lives and stuff like that. So I think
Yeah,
that's very possible there too.
I really think I'm a firm believer. And you think about, going back to these houses in Kansas City, the house there I grew up in was built in, I think, 1922, you know, 60 or 70 years after the Battle of Westport that happened in what is now central Kansas City. So those houses weren't there when that uh, battle was fought. And you can overlay maps from that time frame into, Kansas City today. You can see pretty much that the land where my house was built, this neighborhood was built, was right in the kind of the crosshairs of this battle between the Confederates and the Union. That I think the ultimate death toll, I think, was around 78 or 80 young men were killed. They obviously, the houses weren't there, so I think that's why, talking to these kids that I grew up with, there are kids too, Black South, that experienced something, kids down the street. It's kind of all over. It just wasn't just my house. So that's where I came up with that conclusion, is because, the land hasn't changed. It's just what's built
Right.
on.
No, and it makes sense because there's hauntings where spirits will go through doors that aren't really there anymore, but
Yeah.
they used to be, and
Yeah.
so they're just going about in what they remember.
Yep. Yep. I concur with that. I've had that experience as well. Absolutely.
Now, what about locations where there's artifacts? Kind of going back to war related. It's in Kansas City, but it's World War I. It's the museum there.
Yeah.
Uh, does that draw in maybe spirits too, or is it a different effect?
I think that there is some truth to that as well. I personally think that whole area is very active between Union Station, which just sits across from where the War Memorial is. Union Cemetery, which is the oldest cemetery in Kansas City, is just a block or two east of that. And yeah, I think when you're starting to deal with what people were holding when they died, whether that's a rifle or they were in a, you know, tank of some sort. Yeah, I think when you move that, and I don't think that necessarily dispatches the spirit or the energy that's attached to that. And so when you have a building like that World War I museum in Kansas City, yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's attached into that. Um, so, and it's a fascinating museum. I don't want to discourage anybody from going, but yeah, there's uncomfortableness for me when I'm down there. And I
Mhm.
think that's part of it. But personally, I think a lot of it's from Union Cemetery, just a couple blocks over. I just think that there's a lot of unrest in that cemetery, that whole area.
Yeah, and with cemeteries, I know we spend a lot of time in cemeteries, but not for ghost hunting. We just like documenting headstones and
Yeah.
things for a lot of people that can't travel. So that's like one of our biggest things. But that's always been my thing is not investigating at a lot of cemeteries because I'm afraid if I do, it'll like trap a spirit that wasn't actually trapped there. But if you look for it, maybe it traps them. Again, this is all just conjecture in my mind. I might just be paranoid about doing it. But
Well,
I've always been worried about the possibility of trapping someone that was like living nice in the afterlife somewhere, and now they're trapped in a cemetery.
no, I think that there's some truth to that. I really do. I mean, we're carbon based. I just think that carbon energy kind of remains.
Hmm.
And yeah, I I'll say this: I don't mind going into cemeteries. I I find them peaceful, and I enjoy looking at headstones and imagining what the history was of the people that I'm looking at. But yeah, there are times if I sense something, I don't stay. I don't stay. So, but again, I don't know uh, if it's the energy of the people who are there or people that are attached to the people that are there, if that makes sense. The entities are
Hmm.
attached to the people, and it's not the people themselves in the grave or entombment or wherever. So, but yeah, I think there's some truth to that. Follow your gut. How's that?
Yeah.
I always tell people follow your gut. If you sense something, uh, you know, women's intuition or your sixth sense, man, if you get that gut feeling, follow it. And if you
Right.
don't feel safe, go because I think that's a very strong indicator.
Hey, fight or flight is it's built into us for a reason, right?
Exactly, exactly. And
Um,
there's no shame in no shame in flight.
hey, if you're alive to tell this tale, there's no shame in it, right? It's better than
Absolutely,
alive and afraid than not alive and not afraid.
and not afraid. Exactly.
So here's a question, and I only know this because we were filming at the time, but we were in the Excalibur Hotel in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah,
And we wanted because we're big in photography and architecture, so I wanted to go up to the top floor, or we wanted to go up to get a picture of the castle in New York, right? So we go out and we're filming the whole time, and I'm like, oh, I can't see it from our floor. We're on like second from the top.
yeah,
And so we go back towards the elevator, which is this way. And all the elevators in Las Vegas are in the core of the building, so in the middle.
right.
And we ride it up. And as we're going, we're still filming and we take a picture. And on both times we passed a person, you don't think much of it. But on reviewing the footage of us just like walking around and, talking, it's the same person. But on the lower floor, they're walking towards the edge of the building, and on the very top floor, they're walking from the other edge where there's no elevator. But we didn't
Interesting.
even notice it. So have you had experiences like that where like you think it could have actually been a ghost?
I not in a situation like that, but yes, there are times that I've done double takes and realized that what I saw was real, but they weren't real. if that makes sense.
Mhm.
But I think we all have those experiences, um, where you smell a cologne and there's no one around, or you smell cigarette smoke and no one's smoking. So I think that there are some remnants, and I think that people or entities have enough. Some entities have enough energy to appear, and even if it's just for a minute, and you don't necessarily notice it in the moment, but if you have that camera handy, it becomes apparent once you start looking at the pictures later.
Right. Yeah, no, that's how it was for us because we're like, "It was the same guy. That was a g like,
Yeah,
how did that even happen?"
right.
Um, well, speaking going back to the book, it's out now.
Yes.
You've had some feedback, obviously, from people that you grew up with. What's your feedback from people that maybe you didn't know that have reached out to you?
Um, and some of these are shared on my website as well. I think you touched on this a little bit earlier. Some people said, "Is this a great read? Just very easy to digest." A lot of people said that they just did it in one sitting, that they were just compelled to keep on going. A few people have come up and said, "I've had similar experiences." And I never really knew how to articulate. I always thought I was a bit crazy. So I've had a few people say thanks for just getting this out there.
No, and now that's obviously inspired you to maybe write the second, or did you already wanna write the second before that, and that kinda just pushed you even more?
I think it's pushed me a little bit more. I didn't have I stopped where I stopped because I I stopped in the middle of the story, so I don't want to ruin the book for anyone. But I already had some stories that didn't make it into the first book, so I anticipated doing a second. But once I started getting the feedback and hearing from kids, they grew up with, it's like I definitely have to do it. So I've written about 20 chapters so far. I'm hoping to have that book out sometime in early 2026.
And as far as, like, the writing process from putting pen to paper or finger to type, what is the length of time it takes you to write these books, at least with the first one?
The first one I started at the very end of December. I would say I was completely done writing it, within about 90 days.
Okay.
I had it written. It came really quick because once the stories came out, it just flowed because it just, for me, it just seemed like one story flowed into another, and it was just kind of like capturing uh, growing up, and so it's kind of just a natural succession in some of these stories. So it didn't take too long. The second one's taking a little bit longer. I think it will take even longer. I'm still hoping for early 2026, but I want to get the thought behind the process and the things that are going on, and hopefully explain to the reader what I really was experiencing in the moment, which I don't think I went into too much in the first book. I just kind of telling stories and relating to where I was that day. So I'm hoping to kind of connect and maybe offer some insight in this second book to the reader to maybe pursue their own path.
Well, and 2, when you're looking back at stories, I know 'cause it's been a long process. We're writing a book, and it's taken a long time. I'm embarrassed to say how long it's taken to write it, but, I know as I've gone back and just kinda proofread it and see what stories I've told, so I'm not retelling the same stories
Right,
over and over.
right.
You make connections that you didn't make before. Is that kinda what you're doing? Like, "Oh, maybe this one's connected to there."
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm doing. I've got an outline. I probably have about 50 or 60 chapters outlined, and I'm really trying to reconnect to some of the stories I told in the first book without rehashing the story itself. So other things have kind of come to light after I wrote the first book. People have come to me and said, "Oh, again, that's what happened. But do you remember, again, this also happened, within a day?" So yeah, I'm trying to go back in, maybe explain a little bit more, and I don't know. Again, just kind of offer a little bit more insight about thought process, uh, in terms of what I'm going through today, looking back at these stories from before.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. You've seen my review already, so obviously I really enjoyed it. Again, I don't know if it's because 'cause I'm critical on ghost books and ghost movies because I'm in it, but it's very hard for me to sit down and enjoy a book that's paranormal related. But I
Yeah.
really, honestly, enjoyed your book, and also something that's really good is like the just design of the cover.
Yeah.
And you have two different covers, one hardcover, one paperback. But obviously, that's so important because that's like the first impression. We don't deal with it as much because we're not writers, but we have to do thumbnails and try to grab
Right.
people that
Right.
way. Who does your artwork and what's the process behind putting that together?
So my nephew Alex, who co-authored the book, uh, created both covers. I kind of shared what I wanted on the first for the paperback. That is the house I grew up in. And the bottom half is a picture of me from back in the day. The second cover, because the focus really was on this soldier who continues to follow me to this day. So when you're looking at the hardcover book, it's kind of in there, but the legs and the feet of the soldier are on the cover of the hardcover. So I just wanted to kind of capture that element because he's such an integral part of this story.
Yeah, no, and I think you did a great job. I've seen, is that like the finished cover for the second or just like a mock up now?
Um, the mock-up for the second, I think, will be the cover for the second. That was
Okay.
my design. The book deals with shadows, and so that picture was taken in Cheeseman Park on that memorial that we were talking about.
I wondered. I saw it and I was like, I feel like I know where that is because I've
Yep.
we filmed that episode and we filmed an episode on Houdini there.
Oh yeah.
And so I was like, I think that's where that was, but if I say it and it's in like Wash Park or something, I'm gonna feel dumb.
Yep. Yep. You were right on the money. That's Cheeseman Park and the memorial. There on the east side of the park near the entrance to the Botanical Gardens.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like I said, I'm looking forward to that. And something else I'm looking forward to, we haven't really discussed it on air. I know you and me have talked about it, is the cricket. And
Yeah.
we do best hamburger series, so
Yep.
you got a recommendation. What's your recommendation there?
I'm I don't know. I'm not a very adventurous guy when it comes to my burgers. I like the white cheddar that they have at the cricket. So I'm pretty much just a cricket uh, with white cheddar. But you can be very adventurous there. Anything you choose is going to be great.
Yeah, we've heard good things. So, and also I saw your nephew wrote the book, and then you mentioned that when we connected. So I
Yeah,
was like, yeah, I'm super excited. We'll definitely have to set that up. And
please. Yeah,
one last question before we end off. W- So my buddy lives in Kansas. My other buddy lives in Texas, and they keep trying to get me to go to this house to do an investigation. It's in Atchison under the name the Sally House. What are your thoughts on that one? Have you had
um,
anything?
I've never I've driven by that house. I've never been in it. Um, I don't know. I wouldn't discourage you from checking it out. I'll say that. I think there's more energy around Amelia Earhart for whatever reason, and that doesn't, I think, get as much notice. But yeah, I would not discourage you from going there and checking it out. I'll say that. But
Okay.
I've never been in it.
All right. Yeah. No, I've never. I felt really kind of bummed out when I found out it was in Atchison, and it's like down the road from the Amelia Earhart Birthplace
Yeah,
Museum.
yeah,
Because we went there, and the Amelia Earhart Museum was super cool. I really enjoyed that because they got obviously stuff about her life, and then some props from the movies and stuff, which I thought was super neat.
yeah. It's and I'll throw this in. Alex attended Benedictine College there in Atchison. I can tell you from the times that I've visited, I felt more energy on the bluffs above the river than I did even by Amelia Earhart. I think there's something on that campus. I don't have specifics for you, but yeah, there are a couple things that are around that campus that I think would be cool for you to check out.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely have to look into it. Thank you for the recommendation. I definitely
Of
plan
course.
on getting back out to Missouri, and I want to get out to a football game out there. That's one thing we enjoy is just going to different sports stadiums and
Yeah.
documenting them. And we got near Arrowhead, but it was like in July when we went, so obviously there was no football. But it was cool still to see.
it's quite the experience if you've never done it.
Hmm. Well, before obviously we end off, where can people find your book to purchase and read, as well as more about you if they're interested in finding out more about you?
Sure. The best spot to go to is my website, which is prostreadings.com. People can purchase the book. My photography is on there as well. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. I post little things on there as well. And it's just under Post Readings as well, or Paulie Ost, OST.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining. This has been one I've really been looking forward to. I wasn't sure, obviously when I picked it up and I was like, I want to talk to him, but I wasn't sure how to even connect, and we were lucky enough to connect. So, thank you again so much for joining. This has been awesome.
It's my pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I want to say thank you to Paul for joining us on this awesome episode of Culz Interviews. I really did enjoy his book, and I'm really excited that we were able to talk to him and discuss it a little bit more in depth. So definitely make sure to go down the description below and check out those links for yourselves so you guys can read his book and keep up with all the fun stuff he is doing. But until next time, guys, for more Culz Interviews, click that link to your left. It should be Mark Dowitziak on Edgar Allan Poe. For more from us here at Culz Paranormal, click the link to your right. I believe it's a Throwback Thursday episode up in Cripple Creek. And don't forget to like and subscribe and let us know. Have you had an experience like described in the interview? Tell us in the comments below.